People would often just tell you, draw every day and in time you will get better. Well, I once tried it and I failed massively. In fact, I did more harm than good. For me, in my opinion, that really isn't a good advice or tip. You can't simply just draw every day and expect to see results. It's kind of like learning a new language. Let's use Russian. Yes, it takes time and you need to practice often, but we can all agree that just reading a couple pages of a book in Russian every single day won't drastically increase your knowledge in the language. And that is especially true if you don't know a single thing in that language. If you want to learn to draw, you may want to really ask yourself, what exactly is my goal and what exactly do I want to get good at drawing? This part is extremely vital because the practice sessions will completely vary from person to person. For example, some may want to learn to draw only faces. Even under the umbrella of faces, some will want to learn to draw hyper-realistic faces, or some may want to learn to draw anime faces, or some may want to learn to draw Disney-style faces. Now that was just for people who want to learn faces. Now what if you were the type who wants to learn to draw in perspective? Maybe you want to implement some gesture drawing into your art. Maybe you want to be a mangaka. Let's assume you don't really feel the vibe for drawing people or animals. And what you really want to gain the skills to draw is landscapes like gardens, a waterfall, or even a sunset. Look guys, saying all that was just to show you why you have to make up your mind on what you actually want to be able to draw first before even starting to learn to draw. Because if you don't do that, your art will be inconsistent and you won't see as much progress as you'd want. And because you aren't seeing the progress, you may end up quitting art altogether and conclude to yourself that art isn't meant for you. The second thing you need to make clear to yourself is that art is not just some gifts bestowed on people by the gods or something. Don't get me wrong, some people are born with the vigor and desire to want to make art. And that desire makes them start learning from such a tender age. And then when they grow up to maybe their teenage years, their art looks transcendent. Now you see, they learn from a tender age, not that they just magically knew how to draw or paint or sculpt or play the piano. Bearing this fact in mind, I can say for a certainty, quote me on this, that if you practice the right way, you will in fact learn to draw anything you want and in effect become the pro artist you so desire to be. Now if you follow the previous steps I mentioned in this video, you will know exactly what kind of art you want to create. Be it sunsets, portraits, manga style art or anything you can think of. Now all that's left is to actually start practicing. Let's assume you have a desire to be able to draw full bodies flawlessly in different perspectives and cool dynamic poses. The next thing for you to do is to learn to draw individual body parts. Take note of this. Don't just dive into trying to draw the whole body because you'll encounter difficulties, especially if you're just starting out with art. That's the strategy I personally follow that has greatly helped me to learn to draw those individual body parts. Let's use the hand as an example. Set out time for yourself to learn. Make sure to watch tutorials if you don't completely understand the form of the hand. Don't just watch tutorials and think that with just one practice session you'll be good at drawing the hand. Allow yourself time because believe it or not, your first attempt at drawing hands will not be appealing to look at. In fact, it will look terrible and you may think you're just never going to draw it right. Simply practice as often as you can and in 30 days you just might see some drastic changes. Changes you thought you'd never make. Now let's assume months have gone by and now you have mastered drawing all the body parts in different angles and perspectives. The next thing you might want to learn will be painting or coloring. Disclaimer here. The methods of painting I'm about to talk about is simply how I paint. It may not be the way other artists paint, but since you're watching this video, you probably want to know my methods of painting. Let me explain. For example, when I want to start painting a face portrait of a person, I almost always start from the neck. The only reason being that the neck has the most shadow cast on it. In other words, I start painting from the darkest spots on the portrait and work my way to the lightest parts of the portrait. I also always try to keep my colors properly saturated and not dull. but at the same time, I try to make sure the colors aren't overly saturated. Another thing I keep in mind is to make sure that my paintings have enough contrast. Starting from the darkest spots in the portrait helps me ensure there's an adequate amount of contrast. This is to avoid the painting from looking overly washed out. If you're still here, you're part of the only 20% of people who make it this far into the video, and for that I truly appreciate. Drop it 20% in the comments if you're still here, and leave a like, and you could also subscribe. I'm still on my journey to become a pro artist. Let's become pros together.